Yeah, cool.
All right, Jim, we're ready when you are.
Well, listen, I want to thank everybody for coming tonight. I hope you enjoy the meeting. I think it's going to be really interesting. We have two people to present tonight. Both of them's name is Mike. So we're going to refer to one of them as Mike 1 and the other is Mike 2. One of their name is Mike Warman and the other is Mike Lytle. And they're going to discuss a critter that you can get from Shapeways in S scale. It's a 25-ton GE critter. And over the course of this, they're going to power it up.
Appointment on the 6th of, or the 10th of.
Hello?
Are we there?
Hello?
Yeah, I just heard somebody talking.
Yeah, I did too. I don't know who it was.
Sorry, that was.
Anyway. Who is
I think
me?
it's Bill. I think he's trying to get his mic working finally.
Oh, okay. And they're going to power it, and they're going to detail it in preparation for operating it on their layout. And this is going to be more than one session. The next session in this is going to be July the 4th. And the July the 4th meeting is going to be somewhat different because we're going to have more of a show and tell and question and answer. And the two mics are going to be here to do a second part of their building of this critter. So it should really be interesting. And it can be anything that anybody really wants to make it that night. It's going to be kind of a, let's see what everybody wants to talk about evening. So with that said, let me turn it over to the two mics. I'm really looking forward to this because I love the little critters. Take it away, Mike.
Okay, my name is Mike Warman, and this GE 25-tonner I first saw 2 years ago. One of our train buddies brought it, and he was demonstrating it on the layout, and so we got talking about it. And like you said, this is, I don't know if you can see this. No.
Hey, Mike, could you actually swap off the screen share real quick so we can actually see it, what the other mic is showing us?
I think I've got the screen to show. Do you have it there, Mike?
No, I just see the old one.
There we go.
Okay.
Okay. Anyway, this is the GE 25-tonner. 3D scratch filter. Comes in two pieces, and you end up putting the power drive on here. This is from Northwest Short Line. This is a Stanton drive, and it starts out DC, but we are going to be adding a decoder to it and a keep alive because of the short wheelbase that's on there. And this is going to be pushing train cars around the granary that I will be building for my layout. So, like I said, this is S scale. And I'm going to turn this over now to Mike Lytle because he's going to show you some details that he has been working on for it.
I'm going to take you back to the first slide. When Mike says you get a shell, that's exactly what you get. You get a two-piece shell, the top body and locomotive portion, and the side curtain underframe, so to speak. And there's 4 little tabs, and I'll try to point them out to you here, 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 and here that allows the cab to snap to the underframe. So from there, it's kind of up to you as to how you want to move forward. You know, as I shared with Jim and Dylan earlier, my fiance will certainly pipe in and tell you how true this is. I've always felt if it's worth thinking about, it's worth overthinking. So to that end, what we had to do is develop some way to mount the Northwest Short Line drive. Now, I was working with Dave prior to selling Northwest Short Line to the workers that are there. Dave was a great fellow to work with. I told him I want to do this nest scale. I want to hit code 110 rail. So here's the wheels that I need. So he had all that down. He extended the shafts on it for me. It's an HO drive. And the HO drive came to within a couple inches, which gets you down to a couple of 10,000ths off of what is a perfect fit. So what is an acceptable fit that looks pretty good underneath that chassis. And we'll work up to that. But with it comes some challenges, height, distance off the rail. You want the axle post to be centered in the journal boxes on the side frame. And of course, it always helps when couplers match right. I work for an engineering company. And as I said, if it's worth thinking, it's worth overthinking. So I pick up the phone and I call Dave. I said, hey, Dave, in preparation of receiving this drive, can you share some dimensional information with me? And he goes, I can do better than that. He goes, what are you going to use it for? I said, well, I want to start working up a sketch. I want to start working up a drawing as to how this all fits together. Because I'll send you a drawing. And so he did. He shared his drawing with me. So that allowed me to understand what needed to be done. And as I said before, I tend to overthink things. So, I'm going down the path. I'm going to cut this out of 92,000 brass, 90,000 brass. I'll put it on my little milling machine. I'll mill it down so that it sits on top of the Northwest short line drive just right. And the couplers will match. I find the Shapeways locomotive plastic to be very brittle. And they give you two nice tabs on the inside to mount a coupler to. But I'm not faithful enough of that material to think that you're going to pull 2 or 3 cars out of an elevator and shift them around without eventually breaking off that coupler. So in my mind, it had to be done and secured in the brass. Not only that, but the Shapeway engine is really light. The Northwest Shortline drive is really light. This needed some weight. And so I ran a quick calc and I said, all right, specific density of brass, here's the size, minus the hole I'm going to cut out. All right, it's about 1.5 ounces. And then I got to thinking, well, I've got a little milling machine. I have to rebuild a table on it. I'm not quite ready to do that. What can I do? And it came to me, all right, so you do 32 thousandths brass up here, cut the window out of it. You do 64 thousandths brass, you laminate the two together. And that's kind of the route that we went down. You can see playing the games to make sure that the center line of coupler was fine. Here's the 32 thousandths. Here's the 64 thousandths brass. So I went on my way. You can see the 2 pieces of brass here. Here's a cutout window for it. Years ago, I bought a new concept jeweler saw. Yeah, it's a wonderful thing. And I went out and I bought a bench pin to go with it. It makes it really easy now to cut rather thick pieces of brass at 64,000 or at 92,000. You can see here, here's the cutout, there's a center hole for the drive. Here's the other piece. Now it came down to, you gotta join these together. And as I told Jim early, I'm relatively new to brass, but I like to watch solder flow and I like to dabble in it. So I jumped into it. I had the opportunity not long ago to buy an acetylene air torch. So I took my 2 pieces of brass, a little oversized, that way after I laminated them together, I could file them size. I took some 15,000 solder. I have a little, I'm gonna call it a sheet metal workers joiner, I believe is what it's called. It's made by Wiss. So I put my solder in there, flattened it out so that when I snap these 2 pieces together, put these 2 pieces together and put these 4 clips on, it wouldn't roll back and forth. Covered it all, buttered it with flux real well, put those clamps on there, hit it with a number 2 nozzle on the torch. It probably took all of 20 seconds and I was done and disappointed. It didn't take longer. It did a really good job. I had never done something like this before. I was surprised how well it came out. You'll notice in the right photograph, there's 2 more holes. Well, the first time I put this down on the Northwest Shortline drive, it became readily apparent that there's 2 wires coming out of that drive, one right there, and just by chance, the other one right there. So that allows the power wires to come up off the wheels. So if you want to go to DCC, you can strip them apart. Or if you're running on DC, you leave it the way it's at. That's the mock-up of the drive sitting in the base frame. It's not a good picture. I can't show you the wheels on it at that point. We'll move on. Now, as I said before, it becomes a matter of now, how do you fasten the body down? Now, the first thing that Mike asked me, can I take this body off when we're done? I said, yeah, it's probably good. You know, LED lights last a long time, but every now and then you let the smoke out of a DCC, and there's always DCC upgrades. So yeah, let's make a removable body. Well, since I had a brass underframe, I figured why not run some screws up into it. And so therefore I needed to make something that would go into the body. You can see the back piece here, the front piece here. Now I am, unfortunately, as I said before, I work for an engineering company, and I do enough that from time to time I let things that I've learned soak in, like thread engagement. Well, a 14,000 quarter-inch by quarter-inch angle is not enough meat to allow a 080 thread to gain 1.5 times the diameter of that screw in the number of thread engagements to come in. So I simply took the whole assembly and laminated some 64 thousandths rod to it. You can see it here for the front nose. You can see it here put into the frame. And then I proceeded to drill and tap those. More than enough thread engagement. I'm somewhere between 8 and 9 threads now. So more the merrier. It worked out pretty well. And here you can see it nested in the body. Here's the one in the nose. I bent this front angle to match the angle of the nose. Eventually, we'll epoxy these in. And then you can see it sitting here now directly on top of the frame, so everything matches up and goes together reasonably well. And there's a mock-up of it. You can look through the transparent shell. You can see the angle here, see it through the windows here. The one in the nose is hard to see, but that worked out reasonably well. Now, probably the second set of clips that I did. First set, I just wasn't happy with it. It just didn't quite set well. So I took a different approach. I did a much better job mitering them together so that I came to a nice close fit, and then soldered together a second time. I was pleased with what came out. So that's what's in there now. And that's how it looks like when it's somewhat put together. These 3 screws, this one, and this one, ties the body to the laminated frame. These are S-Helper service couplers, which are very short compared to Katie's. They're a nice S-scale coupler. You can see the Northwest short line drive in here. I had to shorten the front coupler in order to clear that screw, just because where the nose of the engine fell relative to the frame. So that was a success. Put it down for a while now. But fortunately, Mike and I have been working independent. This whole social distancing, we're both at that age where we should know better, and therefore we've stayed distant. So I've done a lot more independent than what we would have done together. And this was a task that we set out to do together. As I had shared with some people before, Mike and I are very good friends. Friendship goes back about 12 years. Drink the water here. We had a mutual friend who had passed away. We met through that mutual friend. If there's anybody that was as passionate and S-scale as this gentleman was, I'm yet to meet him. His father used to own a company called Rex, made S-scale locomotives.
Oh, yeah.
And I actually met his father first, and I met him. I met his brother through his father, and I met Mike through him. Jack was always proud of the fact, he said, give me a half hour of somebody, and I can set that hook and reel them into S-scale and no problem. Mike's a fine, shining example of that. We had him hooked that first night, and I did that all to Jack. He did a great job. Mike likes things that are unique. We had found this picture in the internet. I believe it's in Missouri, of a 25 tonner. And, you know, Mike doesn't like things directly out of the box. I'm sure when he's done, this will be well weathered, but he likes it to be more individual to his likes. So we decided to copy some of what we saw in this engine, which is the diversion away from here's what I got as a package from Shapeways. And the devil's always in the details, and that's where we started moving on this engine. So, you know, we're going to go here first. We'll talk about the air cleaner. You know, we figured since this is a grain elevator, there's going to be a lot of dust associated with grain handling. You know, oftentimes locomotives in those situations and trucks in those situations go to oversized air cleaners, cyclonic air cleaners, so that you can start to separate some of that dust off of the air. There isn't a lot to play with to come up with size. These detail parts certainly aren't available to us in S, so I suggested to Mike that I'll try to put some of these together and make some of these parts for his engine. I looked at the air cleaner. I said, you know, the air cleaner is probably the width of that door. At least that's about the way that it scales out. So I measured his door on the engine, and it came out to be about 1/4 inch. So I started with the top of the air cleaner. So I set myself some goals for that air cleaner. I said, one, I really like the fact that it's a very thin top. You can see under that thin top, it's not solid. So the air obviously goes up into here, separates, comes out and feeds down into the engine here. So I've got that 1/4 inch here. I put together dimensions to develop the rest based on the proportion of the size of that top to what you see here. So that takes me to here. Best laid plans of mice and men. I'm going to use some flat plate. I'm going to start by soldering the center cord, a 1/8 center cord to the bottom plate. And then I'll drop the other part in center it, drop the plate on top, close it, there's the bottom. The 1/8 inch tube sticks out above. Yeah, I can't tell you how fast that one went aside. Everybody should go into something with plan B. But I went in with a plan B and decided to make it up of components that would nest. Because the biggest problem I had is I couldn't keep anything centered. Well, I call it plan B take 5 because I soldered it 5 times to get it right. And let me share with you, I'm soldering that's not fun, but sometimes it's necessary to get to where you want to be. My plan C was to put it on a lathe and cut it as a 1-piece out of a larger stock. Except that I couldn't get that nice undercut here on the air cleaner because there isn't much room to get a tool off of the lathe in here to do that undercut. Plan D probably would have made this as a 1-piece body on the lathe extended up to something that would have fit that 1/4 inch tube, and I could have just slid it over and made a single solder. And that would have been far easier than what I went through. But I got there on plan B take 5. And let me index it down here, sorry. Having a moment with the computer. Now, I went to my fiance and said, hey, I want to see how this looks. She goes, well, I've got some double-sided foam tape. She's a card maker. She's very crafty. She's very creative in her own rights. We do well together. So she says, here, try this foam. It's really sticky. And it really was. So it held up there nicely. So the proportions look good. So I said, that's fine. Let's continue. I think that will work out well. Now, then we got to the intake pipe. Now, I've bent a lot of tubing, and I've thrown a lot of tubing away that I've tried to bend. But about a year ago, I was talking to a fellow who was detailing an engine, and he goes, oh, hell, I never use tubing for that. I always use rod. And I said, okay. He goes, yeah, you take the rod, you anneal it dead soft, you can bend it any way you want. So I did. It works out beautifully. That's 3/32 rod. I annealed it till it was cherry, and it becomes soft enough to work it by hand. It doesn't kink. It just bends right around whatever form you want. So it worked out really well. In the meantime, and it doesn't show here, I drilled a nice hole to end that tube into that air cleaner. Since then, I polished the tube. That was my first setup of the tube to make sure it fit dimensionally where I wanted it to go. And so at this point, threw the air cleaner in a box and said, we'll put it all together later. Let's move on to the next part. I said, well, you know, the exhaust stack was extended up so you don't consume the fumes from the engine. And so let's make an exhaust stack. I measured what was on the engine. It was a 1/8 tube. Excuse me, a 1/16 tube. I should have looked that up. But I couldn't get a drill down there without drilling away the cowl that was on the engine. And I'm going to jump you to the next slide here. You see that little cowl piece? That disappears as soon as you run that drill down there. So I put the tube in there and I said, yeah, that tube scales out just right to what was there, but it's really thick. I took some time and I kept drilling and drilling and drilling and got it down to just under 4/1000 of all thickness. Of course, I didn't drill it all the way through, didn't have to. We're going to paint it black. The inside's going to disappear as soon as you hit it with paint. And this is a little clamp that I have. There's a set of machinist clamps called Cant Twist. They're fabulous. They're a parallel type clamp. The holding ability of that clamp is surprising. It'll hold anything I want it to. And so it held that rod beautifully. In fact, there's two little V grooves in those square heads. Those square heads rotate 360, and it just clamped that tube and held it steady. And here you can see I've created now out of 3/1000 brass that cowl sheet to make up for what I drilled away. The stack goes right to the front edge of the cowl sheet. All we have to do is set that stack height, epoxy it together, and we're good from an exhaust standpoint. Now, if we go back to the engine here, you'll see there's a little bell on the front. And again, we're talking S scale. I wish parts were more readily available, they're not. We used to have a company called S Scale Locomotive and Supply. That company, if it were still around today, would be probably close to 60 years old. Well, they made a ton of brass parts via a community of master makers for steam locomotives. Well, the bell's the right shape. It needed some work. And so I took that bell, I cut the top off, and I'm sorry, there's flux on those pictures. I got ahead of myself. I forgot to take the picture, but I bent a piece of 1/16 by 10/1000 brass to the size and height that I needed. I cut the top off the bell with a jeweler's saw, stroked it a few times with a file, stroked that top with a file, and soldered it together to give you the appearance that we had back on the locomotive here. Now, just off the bottom, little Z-shaped bracket. You might wonder what the paper is for in the background. As I said, my fiance is a crafty person. That's 80-pound card maker's paper, which happens to be 10,000 thick. I wanted a spacer. As you can see, there's air underneath that bell. So I wanted a spacer that wouldn't take the heat away as I soldered it. So I simply set it up on top of the 10,000 paper, soldered it all together, and when I was done, I had that gap that was necessary to try to capture that. Going back to details, mirrors. Yeah, I went through a number of them before I got it somewhat right. I used some phosphor bronze, 15,000 phosphor bronze. I cut again a 3,000 flat for the inside of the mirror. 3,000 flat was a little too soft. It just warped all over the place when I soldered it to a little piece of phosphor bronze wire. So I recut it out of 5,000s, and that worked out pretty good. But now I got this flat mirror with a piece of phosphor bronze wire on the back. It didn't quite look like the picture looked. So I got and cut some more 5,000 bronze, and 5,000 brass, and bent the outside cover shield. And since this was already soldered up, I pre-tinned the shield. I put the two together, laid it flat to the flat part in here that will silver later, and hit it with my iron quickly and laminated the two together.
All right.
To that finished.
Here you go.
Okay. Okay.
And that's the radiator. You know, and you get this nice blank. I'll take you back to here. Here's this nice blank area with no defined detail. I just couldn't live with that. Even though it's not my engine, it wasn't what I wanted. It wasn't what I would have been happy with. So I measured out. I cut the opening, unbeknownst to Mike. I didn't want to panic. So I cut the opening. I measured it. I laid out a brass pattern. I cut it. And by the way, the pattern that you see on the right is really the one that didn't work. But again, I forgot to take pictures. I got so involved in cutting it up and bending it up. All of the flanges in the upright are a 1/16 of an inch, 0.0625 as it measures. And so it gave me the depth that I wanted to create the radiator appearance that I wanted to work to. So here's the pan formed. You can see the flanges here. I soldered up the corners. I turned it over. I bent up some 1/16 inch brass angles. Again, I took some 10,000 brass. I cut it to a strip that was an 1/8 inch wide, scribed some center lines, put it into a set of bending pliers, bend it to a right degree angle, cut them to length, squared the corners, put them in there and soldered them in one at a time. Got me pretty close to what I wanted as a base appearance, as a sub appearance, but still didn't give me that radiator look that I wanted. So I went back, and that's what it looks like. There's a hole in the engine. I was afraid to send that picture to Mike, but I did send him a picture of that put into the body. Oh, this is just gonna fight. Here we go.
Michael,
Yes.
I have to bow out now, but I've got to tell you, it's just fascinating to watch the creative thinking that you put into this and the steps that you take. A number of us who do our own scratch building or kit bashing follow the same procedures, and it's just fascinating to see you're thinking, and I'm thinking like, yeah, that's right. That's what you do. So this has really been a phenomenal presentation. And sorry I have to leave. I have other things, pressing business, but this is wonderful. And Jim, thank you for doing these things. And I'll see some of you again at another time. But Mike, and it's just incredible.
Well,
Is this ever going to be available in O-scale?
you know, I'd have to ask Mike to go back and look at it. It's an awful nice model. And Alan,
Okay.
thank you for the kind comments. We appreciate
Okay.
it.
Appreciate it. Thank you now. Good night, guys.
Thanks for coming.
Okay.
Well, it still didn't quite get me to what I was hoping to present to Mike. So I did some digging. I found some brass wire and some screen, and I cut it and put it over the top. And I was starting to bend up some angles here, but I'm going to have to go back and rebend them. I'm just not happy with the way they're coming out. But I'll get there, and that'll allow me to frame. And that way, when I drop this in the engine, it'll seal it to the top of the engine. So that's an ongoing project. And as you can tell, there's a penny in there. It gives you an idea of size. We're almost to the end here for what we've accomplished so far. And we can give you an idea where some of this is going, oh, that's even out of order. Door latches and hinges. I can share with you that I have some 30,000 phosphor bronze. I created the template. I carved off the hinges. You see the hinges in here and in here. And I carved them off. I'm going to cut some 30,000 phosphor bronze, and we're going to epoxy those in to be the hinges. They weren't well formed, and to be quite honest, we were somewhat surprised how rastered that body. And raster is probably not the right term, but when that was printed, it printed with a lot of horizontal steps going up. And finishing the body surface was tough. and I couldn't see preserving no hinges when they're easy enough to make. So I carved them off and then scribed through where they were in the door seam. They'll go back on later. I'm also going to take some 15,000 brass wire this time instead of phosphor bronze. And I'll take the 15,000 brass wire and flatten it a little bit to give you that latch. And I'll create just a simple L shape for the latches. The same is true for the door. Handrails and grabs. Boy, did that get out of order. I apologize. Makes me wonder where this door. Oh well, best laid plans of mice and men. You can see the rails on here now, on both sides, and surprisingly enough, they're not the same on both sides. That front access ladder is only on the brakeman side. On the engineer side, it's solid going back. On most engines, you can find those examples where they put another set of steps up over here. So it's really however you want to make it, so to speak, in approach on this one. So I started bending up some phosphor bronze wire, and it doesn't show well, and I apologize. Over here are the grabs for the side of the engine. I always make one more than I need just in case. Over here is the rail. My next step is to create a template on a piece of wood, tape it down, solder those joints together, and then I'll solder an end pad to the proper length so that it seats the engine frame and attaches securely. I bend this with what's called a grab handler. It's a great little tool. It was made by, I think, Missions Models years ago. I think you can buy something like this now through Micromart. You can buy something like this through a company called, no name of this company. It's UMM-USA. They're out of Indiana. If you ever want to look for unique tools, you could spend a couple hours there. Most of it is aircraft modeling, but his depth of tools that he both designs and sells and that he imports and sells is absolutely amazing. What's nice about this is you can, these are in US systems, this is a metric system, and you can simply space it across, hold it down at a right angle against a shoulder. You can see a sawtooth here. Match it on the other side, form it down, and you get these beautifully consistent forms, one after another after another.
What was the name of the company, Mike?
The company was the one in Indiana,
Yeah.
UMM-USA.com. John, whose last name I can't pronounce. I wish all vendors were as nice and helpful as this guy is. It's an open phone policy from 11 o'clock in the morning to 11 o'clock at night. If you want to ask him a question of how can I do this, even if he doesn't sell the tool, he'll share suggestions with you. And if you're asking him about a tool that he represents and sells, he'll tell you anything you want to know, and he'll tell you whether or not it's the right tool. He's not afraid to say, no, that's not what you want. That isn't going to help you. He's a great guy. It's rare in today's market when you're buying internet to run across somebody who says, call me anytime. And he does. He's very good about that. And really that kind of takes us to where we're at today. And on July 4th, we're going to do a little update and take you through, hopefully, here the side rails all soldered. Here is the latches now mounted, and take you through whatever we've accomplished between now and then and give you an update, probably in a similar fashion. And the good news is Mike's been pretty pleased with the way this has been coming along. Like I said, he likes things unique and he likes things detailed. And my only regret is that we can't spend the time together doing this. Because we do spend a lot of time together. I enjoy making and soldering switches. Mike likes laying switches. I go over, and Mike is kind enough that when things are back to normal, every Thursday night is what we call a gathering at Mike's house. Almost every Thursday night, with the exception of Thanksgiving. There's a standing order, but we wouldn't want to do that to his wife. We like her too much. Like, that's another story. but I go over on weekends and help him catch up, help troubleshoot things. He's a great friend. Any questions? I feel like I've spoken too much. So ask your questions of Mike number 1.
Does Shapeway make any other kind of critters like this, or other kind of engines for S scale, or is this it?
Surprisingly enough, Shapeway makes what's lacking in this, for those who model more modern, is that equipment. Shapeway is becoming the go-to source for modern S-scale equipment that isn't readily available. Shapeway has become the go-to source for, and I'm really surprised by this market, but it's immense. And we've met a fellow recently, agricultural modeling. You can buy darn near anything you want for a semi-truck, for a pickup truck, for a tractor, for a farm implement, for a farm scene that you could think of in 1/64 scale, which is S. The following is phenomenal. I mentioned before, we have a friend who passed by the name of Jack. His wife hosts an interstate gathering every September in memory of Jack. Go ahead, Mike. You talk, tell people about the NOS gathering. Tell people what NOS stands for.
NOS is the Northern Ohio S-Scalers, and we just do scale. We don't do flyer, although we have converted some flyer to scale. But basically, it's all scale stuff. Jack, his dad, had the Rex S-scale locomotive line. It has since passed to somebody else. The meeting, this interstate meeting that we have at the end of September, we've had people from Pittsburgh and New York, Michigan, Columbus, Cincinnati, Indiana. You know, these people just want to come. They can bring things to run on his layout, which is both DC and DCC, and we have a good time. And with Jack's passing, she does, I'll say, have a lot of brass S-scale equipment for sale, if anyone's interested in that. What else?
Michael 1 or Michael 2, I have a question. Would there be room, if you wanted to fit a sound decoder in there with some type of little speaker?
Oh, you wouldn't believe how much room there is inside of that. The answer is yes. There's 3 things that we want to do to it. A DCC decoder, a keep alive. It's a short wheelbase engine. You know, a lot of our frogs on the turnouts that we've made are right now dead. And we're dependent upon longer wheelbase to run through those. Yeah, this doesn't. So a keep alive is going to be an important factor. And we have a mutual friend by the name of Erin. She's phenomenal with decoders and sound and sugar cube speakers. And I didn't mention it before, and I'm not even sure I told Mike, I drilled out the radiator from the bottom so we can let the sound out of a sugar cube speaker mounted just beneath that radiator. And so yes, there's, with all of the drive now occurring beneath that flat plate, we only have that one bolt that sticks up that obstructs anything inside that engine. I'll take you back to an earlier picture here. So it's very surprising how much space there is. I mean, no. That's it right there. That's all that sticks up. The drive falls within the chassis. So yeah, we have all of this to work with for a
And you could
decoder.
fit a nice speaker in there.
Oh yeah, we could do well with that. Erin's been working with sugar cube speakers. She has Jeep 9 and S scale. that just, goes right through its steps as you speed it up. And it sounds phenomenal. In fact, I think she put 2 speakers in. It's stereo, and it sounds fantastic. So I told Mike, that certainly isn't I tend to let the smoke out of them too easily. So we're gonna go visit Erin when this is all done, and she's always welcome people coming over asking for her help. She does a great job.
Mike, where do you get your brass from?
K&S Engineered Products. Dylan, can you go back to our screens rather than the projected screen?
Yeah, you just gotta get out of screen share. But yeah, once you do that, you should be good to go.
Sorry. Okay. K&S Brass Products. And that's what they look like. I've bought a lot over the years. I'm older than I'd like to remember that I am. Had some problems years ago. My wife passed away 7 years ago. There was probably a 6 or 8 year period of time when I didn't do much with modeling. But what I did do is every time I went to the hardware store, I'd buy a pack of brass or I'd buy a sheet of brass or whatever. Most of what I buy is K&S products. Up until about 3-4 years ago, they used to make 1/32 angle all the way up to something way bigger than what I needed. They stopped that about 5 years ago. So now I find myself buying flat sheets and bending it. I need to find a better bending tool than what I'm using. It's time consuming and it's a little hard on the hands, but it achieves what I want most of the time. I bought some brass rod off the internet, off of Amazon. There you buy anything on Amazon, it seems, and had it delivered. And I use that for turning things. I've got a small compact 5-lathe. It's made by a company called Emco. It was made in Austria. I don't know. It's probably 30 years old. And a small milling machine that I need to rebuild the table on. So right now it's not useful. So I've been stocking brass. My fiance is out of the room. I can say this. I probably have about 40 pounds of brass all told. In boxes, sorted, in containers. If I find a lot of it at a hobby store, a lot meaning a grab bag full of it, I buy it. There used to be a time when you could get some deals off of eBay. Yeah, I don't remember the last time I bought anything off of eBay. But that's where my brass comes from.
How do you flatten your wire?
I mentioned before I worked for an engineering company. I've gotten around to a lot of places. I can honestly say I designed a facility to test torpedo engines. I designed a facility to make cast brass, extruded cast brass. And the way you straighten brass wire, believe it or not, is put it in a vise, grab a pair of pliers, and pull it just a little bit. And you'll feel it stretch. And when you're done, it's dead arrow straight. Can't do that with steel. Brass, in fact, they have what's called a straightening bench. They were making hexagonal bars that is sold to people like Parker Hannifin that make hydraulic fittings in brass. And you'll notice the hydraulic fittings all have a hex head to it. And they would turn these pieces out of hex stock. So we're talking about a piece of brass that probably weighs 200 pounds. It's probably a good 1 inch in diameter, if not 1.5 inches. And they put it on a draw bench and just snap it a little bit, and it straightens that like a ruler. That's how I go about that.
How do you flatten it out?
Oh, let me look around here. I have a couple of things that I use. A little planishing hammer does a pretty good job. Planishing hammer has a nice rounded face to it. I don't know, can you see that okay?
Yep.
And the other thing that I use, I mentioned before, sheet metal people use these. They're made by Wiss. It's a big jaw, but it closes dead flat. That, I wish they'd have made a handle symmetrical, because you got to hold it the right way or it hurts. And that's the wrong way. This is the right way. But it's made by a company called Wiss, available at Home Depot, Menards, Lowe's, I'm sure. And it's used to close seams on sheet metal ductwork. And that fellow's probably 8 or 10 years old. And I had mentioned to Jim before, I had a very good friend who was a mentor who always told me you take care of your tools. I tried very hard to take care of my tools. And, Mike will tell you, here are my files. They always get wrapped up. They don't bang against each other. Some of these files are, and I have to admit, I've done my share of abuse on files. I've thrown a few files away because I filed them wrong, but I try to take care of what I have. And sorry, that was a long version of a short answer of I'll plan to keep transparent with.
Now I wound up getting here a little bit late. Where did you get the 3D print from?
Michael, that's in your wheelhouse.
Yeah, that would be Shapeways. I talked to Rob Behringer. He's in Columbus. He told me where he got it, so I got online, and you do have to search through the 164 stuff for a while before you find it. But I did, and I ordered it. Really like it. It is. In fact, I ordered a couple of them. I don't have a name for the person that did it, but it is in the Shapeways 1 to 64.
Yeah, if you go to Shapeways and look up 25-ton GE engine, you'll pop some up in other scales.
Yeah,
How good?
Basically the reason why I was late, I was actually looking into getting my own 3D printer and all that, and then something popped up on YouTube going like, oh, this particular person's on live. I'm like, oh, that's nice and all that. And I was like, oh, wait a minute, there's another group that I'm actually more interested in.
We had a gentleman last Wednesday who had printed some trolley cars in HO on a 3D printer, and then to surprise us all, he held up an O scale. He had done it'll look darn good. His costs to originate the engineered files that he uses were reasonable. I was very surprised at the quality and appearance of that 3D printed trolley.
How was your quality for the critter?
Not what I would have expected. And I don't know the proper term, Jim, but the sides were very stepped. You could see, I called it rastering earlier. It needed a lot of body work to finish it, to make it smooth enough. Granted, primer would have filled a little bit, but when you're working in S, yeah, I felt it needed to be sanded, so I did.
If that's the same material I'm thinking it is, it does. I originally had some prototypes done in that stuff before I started having Sculptio do stuff for me and casting my own stuff. Just because I didn't know what Sculptio was, I didn't know they existed. That stepping is not unusual with that type of print. Like I had some cap stacks for a porter made, and you could see the stepping even in the vertical surfaces where in theory you shouldn't see stepping. And that's one of the downsides of that material. Not to say it doesn't make good stuff. It does, but it's got its flaws.
What is stepping? What does that mean?
Okay, so basically with a 3D print, and let me actually take this off and push the talk real quick. So basically what stepping is when you're printing something, you're doing it layer by layer. So on the very edge of your print, it's not necessarily going to be the same size as the print above it, as that next layer. You know, it's not going to be on an, you can't print the stuff on an angle just yet. It's not, well, it depends on the printing, I should say. You can do it. There's anti-aliasing and whatnot, but it depends on the type of printer. Most printers, even like the MJF that I have stuff done up in all the time, even that actually has some stepping to it. I actually have a part right here. You can see it perfectly. So this is for the junkyard dog. For those of you guys that can see it, but when you look at it on the roof, this in theory is smooth to the touch, but you can feel the little layers. And that's just because of how it builds up.
Yes.
You know,
Well,
the polishing takes most of this out, and I'm going to leave it to Bruce Gavins to fix the rest of this. What's the preliminary mold? I'm just going to leave that to him. I already talked to him today, and I'm like, hey, what do you think? He's like, that'll be easy. But that's because we're having it resin cast for a reason. You know, some of the problems with prints is that it can get kind of pricey. You know, Shapeways, that material you guys are using, that material is bloody expensive.
yeah, it's that fine frosted detail. I can't think what the name of it is.
Yeah, that's exactly what they call it, fine frosted detail, I think.
Yeah,
And
we have a manufacturer in S by the name of Jim King, Smoky Mountain Model Works. He has his own 3D printer and he does that professionally as a business. And he makes S-scale stuff as a side. I don't know how he does it. There is no rastering, no stepping in his. He has it then cast in epoxy. Master's made, has them cast in epoxy, but he doesn't run too many off a master before he throws the master out.
no, I know. I've seen his prints that he's made. They're fantastic. Part of that comes down to the type of printer you're using. So a resin printer, like a liquid material printer, it's a lot easier to avoid that stepping with one of those than it is with something that's using a solid material like a plastic filament or that fine frosted detail, which is using like a powder and a wax support structure.
Agreed.
The MJF is basically just a nylon powder that gets melted as it's layered over it. So that's where you get your stepping from. Resin, you can anti-alias the edges so it's not as strong of a light source on the edge.
Okay.
So it kind of tapers it a little bit. You can still see it. If you were to look under a magnifying glass, you'll still see the stepping, but it's nowhere near as bad as some of the other prints. The problem with a resin, with some of these resins though, is they're not as strong. You know what I mean? They're not as strong as the traditional nylons or other plastics that are used. Like the nylon that I use, I've basically gone to nylon because for the cost point, which is a little bit more than the resin if I was to do it myself, I can't complain. It's, you know, I've done the oops, I dropped it test on most of the stuff I've had done by them, and I haven't broken anything. It depends on the material, but you know, if you can't break it by dropping it or break it by manhandling it, I'm pretty happy.
Well, let me ask you a question, Dylan. The same 3D CAD drawing will work on any printer. Is that right?
Absolutely. It's how you export the file. You need to export it as what's called an STL. Don't ask me what STL stands for. I could never quite figure it out. And it's all techno jargon that I honestly just went, I need to know this. No, I don't.
Well, let me ask you this. If the guy at Smoky Mountain does a beautiful job, why not just have whoever created the CAD drawing for the critter, just have him send it to Smoky Mountain, and you get a beautiful print out of it? Is that right?
It's not a bad idea. It comes down to what the creator's willing to do. I've noticed with Shapeways, there are a handful of them within the last year that have started selling the file itself so people can print it themselves. It's a matter of who's willing to do that, though. Not many people have started doing that yet. I don't know why, because to me, if you've already got the machine, wouldn't it logically be cheap? You know, you're still making money on the file. So logically, that would be a cheaper solution. You'd still have to put in the man hours to get it to print right. But that's not a difficult thing to do. It's just a question of is the guy who designed it willing to do that?
Okay.
that's the thing. You can't force somebody to do what they don't want to do.
Yeah. Well, the other question is, why isn't Shapeways using the same kind of technology as the Smoky Mountain guy? I don't understand.
The problem
Because-
with
because-
one of the
because-
problems with resin printers, like the resin printers you can get for yourself, like the one I've got down in my garage, they don't last nearly as long between maintenance cycles as some of these more high-end printers. Like there's basically a scale. If you were to look at it, it's basically a slanted line. Towards one end is fine detail, and the other end is the time it takes to print it. At least that's how I look at it. So one of the things that you got to consider is these machines are designed to do it a lot quicker than something on a desktop that's designed for high detail. And they need to do it quickly. They're getting to the point where the detail is a lot better. As new machines come out or updates for existing machines come out, the detail is getting a lot better. Like when I first started using Sculpio, really? Just be quiet, Rory. So when I first started using Sculpio, one of the things I noticed is that stepping like in the roof, that was actually a lot worse. Now, it polished out fine, but there was a far greater amount of stepping to some of my cabs. But then when I've gotten cabs down the road, like I just got a bunch of cabs for Heisler in, and the stepping on the roof is a lot less noticeable. And I emailed them and asked them, hey, how'd that happen? And they got an update. They updated the machines. They got new software for them that let them have a better control of it. So it's coming down to what upgrades can the current machines take, and if once you hit the top level of what they can take, what's the next machine that you go to? Like the machine they use for the MJF is something made by HP, and it's like a $10,000 machine. It's like I never own one, nor would I want to because it's too complicated for me to handle. So let an expert deal with it. But that thing is quick, and for the detail you're getting, it's pretty good. It's a good back. It's right. I'd say it's right in the middle of that line between time to print and detail. I'd say it's right in the middle of that line. At least, again, by my approximation. Other people may have different opinions on it depending on what they see. But it's not so much as the CAD file, it's the technology to make it.
And the other thing that Shapeways does is you have your choice of print materials you want, including sintered metal. You can get printed brass parts. I have to believe it's off the same equipment also. So
similar equipment, like the sintering is basically a metal powder that gets melted, very similar to MJF. So it's a similar machine, but it's a different print head.
Yes.
But yeah, it is similar. And then you start getting into binder jetting, which is like a laser or something like that. And I'm like, what? Why? This literally sounds like an inkjet printer that I put on my desk. Some of the technology that goes into it that controls these printers is based off of that. I learned that rather recently.
So Mike, I assume what you're saying is you can get pretty much anything 3D printed you want in any material. Is that right?
You can get quite a variety of materials available through Shapeways. It's quite amazing. Things like sintered brass, for example, and I don't remember the exact proportion. If you want something, I'll give you an example. If you want something 1/4 inch thick, sintered brass, you really have to design it to be 1/4 inch thick plus 2% to allow for shrinkage in the material. Brass tends to shrink as it's being sintered. So you have to plan that ahead. Of course, CAD drawings, it's very easy to rescale something. All right, I drew it at 100%, give it to me at 102%. Now you got a perfect drawing for that. So I mean, from that standpoint, it's easy. Now I give a lot of credit to these people 50, 60 years ago that made all these masters that would then go in to make the wax slips to go into investment casting, because every one of those had to be made 2 to 3% oversized. I have a hard enough time making it the size it should be, let alone conceiving in my little head that it should be 2 to 3% bigger uniformly all the way around, so that when you cast that metal and it shrinks, it gives you the size that you want.
Yeah.
That would changing the position. Would that get rid of the steps on it?
It could. It depends on
Instead
the
of having the
the stepping. You
yeah,
mean?
instead of printing the whole cab, print the roof separately at a 90-degree angle. So now you're doing on the other axis. So instead of doing it in the z-axis, where it's going up, like this, now you can actually sort of follow the curve of the cab. I mean, it makes it 2 parts, but it might get rid of that.
My experience with the Shapeway is that it didn't matter what part of the model you touched, it was stepped.
Gotcha.
Here's the shell. Probably the flattest part of the whole shell is the running boards. That had probably the least amount of stepping. The sides up here were terrible. You'd run your finger up it and you could hear every single ridge, every single step. The roof was tough too, but this has been sanded down. A lot of this has been sanded down. So right now it feels pretty good. Like I said, I was a little disappointed by that in the overall quality, but it's still going to build to be a nice model when it's done. It's just going to take a little more time to get there.
Gotcha.
I've seen people print on angles before, and most of the time when they print on an angle, it's simply to get a part to fit within the chamber, within the allowable print chamber. So they'll print it at an angle, for example, like this, and they'll have downcomers that support that piece as it's being printed, and you've got to go in and cut the downcomers, and then you can break the piece off. But again, this is a small engine, but if the chamber isn't big enough to do this, you do this in the chamber, and then it fits in the chamber. I don't have a lot of experience with that. That's what I've seen.
Gotcha.
Mike, one, I'm interested in 2 questions here for you, and they should be fairly simple. Sound like you have a pretty good group of S-gauge people in your area. How many people do you have involved in that?
Aha. Well, well, after Jack passed, there's only been about 5 guys that are coming over to my place. When we have our interstate, we could have between 12 and 20. So,
yeah, within the NOS group, we probably have maybe 14 people all told. But of those 14 people, there's probably, for the most part, 4 that remain constantly active and meet prior to social distancing once a week. And the 4 of us have become good friends, have fought our way through. We have a 5th person that comes when he can, but that's once every 2 months, once every 3 months. But it's nice to have a group that size, all with a common interest, all with a common goal, and we achieve an awful lot on Mike's layout in a short period of time. Mike received a layout that was from somebody who had passed, and his wife said, if this isn't out of the basement, I'm going to have it torn out. And so the group got together, helped Mike relocate it to his house, and then we helped them put it back together. I was not part of that. I had my own problems at that time that took me away from the group. And Since then, we've grown that layout considerably. Oh, Mike's paying for it. What the heck? No, we've grown that layout considerably. It's what he has in his mind that we try to give him with the work that we've done. We've mounted a turntable in it. We've put an addition in here. We've put, I don't know how many switches in place. The switches that we had were Tamalco and Shinohara. And we've been replacing them all with handmade switches from Fast Tracks. And they're pretty reliable. They're a pretty nice switch all in all.
Mm. And whereabouts are you located?
Well, that's a secret. No, Mike, go ahead.
Okay.
You give them all the hard questions.
Okay. Located in Medina County, Ohio. Actually,
Oh, okay.
Lafayette Township is
Oh, we lost Michael on that one.
Lost you.
Oh,
Well, Mike's having some technical difficulties.
So
There he's back. You'll have to say it again.
Done.
We kind of lost you for a few moments.
how did I lose you?
We lost the audio portion and the picture froze. Might be bandwidth.
yeah.
Might have been by design.
Information is censored.
Well, we're in Lafayette Township off of State Route 42 on 162, Chatham Road.
In relative terms, Mike is probably 36 miles out of downtown Cleveland heading south-southwest. I live in Medina County. I probably live maybe about 20 minutes from Mike. The whole group is somewhat centered in Medina County, though we have members in Cleveland and all over, but as I said, they're not really active. They're
Yeah.
just members.
Well,
Mike,
still not a bad a group of interested people in this scale. So,
As my wife used to say, you guys don't drink, you don't smoke, hell, spend as much time as you want with the rest of the guys, you know.
yep.
I didn't tell her that we also spend money from time to time on mom. I might have changed her mind if she knew that.
How interested are they in this scale? Hello?
Can't lost you a little bit there, Mike.
I'm sorry. I was asking how much
Technical
are
difficulties.
they
Yeah.
interested in this scale?
I think what Mike is trying to say is, I don't know if any of you out there have an interest in S scale, and if so, what do you model? And if you have an interest in S scale, we'll be more than happy to send you an invitation to one of our interstate gatherings. I'm not quite sure where everybody is at. You know, with the internet, you could be in France right now. Of course, you've been staying up late if you were in France, but I know Jim is, I believe, in Florida. Mike and I are both in Ohio. And I don't know where everybody else resides.
Right now, I'm up in Michigan,
Oh, what part?
just outside Detroit.
Oh,
Oh, you're not that far away.
Yeah, I'm not too far away. I figured
We
you
have
was
several
pretty
people from
close,
that area.
knowing RTA.
Oh, there you go.
So,
Yeah,
yeah, I figured you wasn't too far from Cleveland.
I do work up in just outside of Midland, Michigan, and Hemlock, Michigan. And boy, did Midland get smacked a week ago.
Yeah,
Yeah.
man, what a terrible mess up there.
Certainly was.
Amazing.
Mike, too, I from what you talk about, it seems like Shapeway is your source, your only source really for S-scale stuff right now. I mean, parts and that kind of thing.
And that's pretty much true. You know, over the years, we had a company called American Models. Ron Bashist out of Michigan, not too far from Detroit, up in the
Mhm.
Flint area. Ron brought a rebirth to S scale for us and came out with an FP7, came out with some more, call it more generic box cars and hopper cars and such, and gave S gauge and S scale quite a rebirth. And there seemed to be a surge for a while, you know, Overland Models. I can't think of the fellow's name. I want to say it's Tom Wilson. Right. Overland Models created quite a few S-scale models after a while in brass, locomotives, diesel engines, and cars. And there seemed to be quite a surge going. We had a gentleman come along and develop S Helper Service showcase line. He started out
Yeah.
helping Ron Bashista with American Models come up with a greater level of detail and spun off his own work. He has since been purchased by Mike's Train House, MTH. And Mike's Train House has kind of let us flounder out there a little bit. And there hasn't been a lot new coming out. Overland Models, I couldn't tell you the last time they made a brass S-scale engine. We had a company by the name of Omnicon out of Indiana, Illinois. He created a whole series of engines. There's a group in O-scale. What is it called? The 100? The 100 Kings or something like that. But he did similar
O-scale
Scale
Kings.
Kings.
O-scale Kings. And gentleman Charlie Sanderfeld did very similar in S. He came out with a number of S-scale engines that were fabulous. He had a connection with Samsung, would fly over there frequently and have his work done and did really good work. But Charlie was a little self-destructive in his habits and didn't really have a good focus on business, we'll say. And he died prematurely, and that whole thing disappeared rapidly. We have a gentleman out of Detroit right now, River Raisin Models.
Oh, yeah.
He's done a number of beautiful things and continues to. He is probably the only true fresh manufacturer of new items in S scale right now that are running. Jim King, Smoky Mountain Model Works, does a fabulous job with freight cars. He's done a couple of diesels, a 70 tonner and a 44 tonner. And he did a very good job with those, and he continues to do that, but it's more of his side business, and of course it has to be. His primary business is industrial focused 3D printing, and he does a lot in the medical field, I believe. There isn't a lot known about Jim. He's a great guy to talk to. Turns out a fabulous item. I'm waiting for the Baltimore, Ohio M15K wagon top boxcar to come out in resin. That's due out here in a couple of months. If there's one thing in S scale that you learn very quickly, nobody ever makes a schedule, so you better be damn patient. Couldn't tell you how long. Sometimes you have to wait, but you learn that quickly, and it's usually worth the wait.
But you know, it's been an interesting experience for me. I model O-scale traction, and there's not a whole lot of us around, I don't think, anymore, but few of us. But what I find about writing my articles for the S-Scale Resource Magazine is it's getting harder and harder to find S-Scale modelers for me. I don't hear about them like I used to. When I first started writing the series about 3 years ago, you know, I could get references from one to another and so forth, and talk to somebody for 5 or 10 minutes and pick up 2 or 3, 4 names. I'm not getting that anymore. So I don't know if there's not a lot of people staying in S-Scale or not a lot of people coming into S-Scale. I'm not sure what the market is right now for it.
I
But
think
it's,
I agree with you. I think it's all of the above. We as a group, we look at the average age of people at our interstate gathering. They're more my age than they are younger.
Hmm.
There's so many interests to the younger people of that catches their interest. And model railroading, I don't think is one of them. And I'm not quite sure why that is. There are facets of model railroading that keep up with technology. Iowa scale models and their diesel controller unit, DCC in the sound and the keep alives, and technology-based items like that. But it doesn't seem to catch their interest. I think the younger generation that we're seeing is being raised on electronic games, and they're dealing with computers. And my grandson at 8 years old can probably navigate a computer almost as good as I can. Maybe not, but I'm certainly I'm certainly not a Dylan, that's for certain. But I'm a long way from knowing as much as I could. But that's what they're being raised with, technology-wise. Their homework is turned into a computer. I hate to say this. I think
I'll be honest with you. I'm a year outside of homework at this point, only because I'm out of college. So
yeah, I understand that. I think, I hate to say this. I really believe we're in somewhat of I think we're going to be extinct some year as a hobby.
I call it we're in a dying hobby.
Yeah,
That's why I call it, because you look and it's mostly all older people in it. And like you said, we're not having the younger generation coming up through the ranks to replace any of the ones we lose.
you got to look at the whole hobby market, I think. And I'm not sure that totally is true. I think the model railroad market may be changing. I think I hear more people talk about dioramas. I hear more people talking about switching layouts. I don't hear people talk about basement layouts or two-level layouts, huge layouts. Some people call them enterprise layouts. I don't hear that much about that from any scale anymore. I hear dioramas. I hear switching layouts. I hear shelf layouts in a bedroom or in a den. That's the kind of model railroading that I'm hearing about. And I talk to a lot of people daily on trying to get my articles done.
There's a gentleman in S scale, Canadian, by the name of Trevor Marshall. Trevor, a number of years ago, came up with his own approach to model railroading in what he termed it as achievable layouts. And to him, building an enterprise was not to be an achievable layout. Whether it be point to point, and I believe his is just point to point for a certain area of the Canadian railway. And he's done a fabulous job of scenicking and detailing. And it's a manageable chunk. As part of achievable layouts, it isn't, oh, they just brought out a new engine, I have to have that. No, you're only going to have 2 steam locomotives, 2 diesels, or a very small quantity, because that's what you have room for on your small layout.
Mm-hmm.
A little more than a shelf, but because you've limited the amount of rolling stock, the amount of power that you have, and the amount of area you're scenicking, you can arrive at a more finished look that much quicker, and you can afford time and dollar-wise to spend more time detailing what you have rather than achieving a compromise. And he had written a whole series of articles on achievable layouts. And I think you're right from that standpoint, Jim, that the market is changing out there.
And therefore, you know, the manufacturers that came out, you know, if they come out with one diesel, they'll have it in no telling how many road names and so forth. I'm just not sure where the market is right now for that kind of production, because I used to be a Lytle collector, and if Lytle came out with it and I could afford it, I bought it.
You had to have it.
I had to have it. Anything they produced, I had to have one of those. Never took most of them out of the boxes. I mean, it was ridiculous.
It loses value when you do that.
But, you know, now I've got my trolley layout. I make everything for it. My real concern about the hobby, because I agree with you, Mike, I do see it changing. My real concern is that the skills, Mike, that people like you possess, that you bring to the table, that you can educate other people like you've done tonight, that is what we're going to lose. And once we lose those skills and that knowledge base and being able to pass it from one generation to the next, that's what I'm concerned about. That's why I'm doing these Zoom programs. That's why I'm writing this series of articles.
Well,
Because in 5 or 10 years, particularly the 10-year time period, if we lose those skills, how are we going to get those back?
yeah, I agree. And let me say before it gets too late here that both Mike and I appreciate the opportunity to participate with the group. Thank you for asking us to be part of the group, allowing us to be part of the group. Thank you for asking us to put together a presentation to share.
Well, I've thoroughly enjoyed it, and I know the others have too, and can't thank both of you enough for taking your time and wanting to be here. We really do appreciate it.
Our pleasure.
I've been listening to these past meetings, and they're all a learning experience. Everybody has something offered to this group, and I'm really appreciating all of this. Thank you.
Well, that's great. Well, listen, next Wednesday, or next Saturday, I'm sorry, May the 30th, we have a manufacturer and a distributor, Kevin McCumber. He has a company called MGMC, Manufacturing and Distribution Company, that is, it's just unbelievable to me, the kind of products that he's brought to market and the things that he's willing to share with us. He seems to be buying an awful lot of companies right now, and he has a view of the market and a view of the hobby that I think is going to really be interesting to everybody. So Kevin will be here next Saturday, and look forward to seeing you all back then.
Thank you.
Thanks for
Thank
coming.
you.
All right. Thank you, Jim.